Congressman Bilirakis, good to see you here as well, and chairing the Religious Freedom Caucus, I believe, as well. So delighted that you're here. Thank you for the coverage that you've already done of the topics, so there's really no need to cover any of those topics. I will ask that my testimony be in the record as if presented.
Without objection, so ordered, and all of your testimonies and any other information you want to attach to the record. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think just really get right to the heart of it. You've got 120,000 Christians that are being strangled, blockaded by Azerbaijan. It's against the peace agreement. It's against what the International Court of Justice has found. And yet it's taking place. It's being backed by Erdogan, who is the probably the leading Islamist person in the world that's pushing militant Islam of any government leader in the world, is President Erdogan. He just got reelected on top of that. And he's got this pan-Turkic idea of a corridor, and the one kind of sliver of land that stands between him and this pan-Turkic corridor is Armenia. And so there were 3 incursions into Armenia proper the week we were there on the fact-finding trip. This isn't just Nagorno-Karabakh, this is into Armenia proper. And we were at Jermuk, which is a kind of a resort town in one part of Armenia, and you could see the Azeri forces on the other hill from where we were, and the ability for them to just lob artillery into that town at any time is right there. It really reminded me of Sarajevo in the situation there, where you had the troops that just surrounded the hills and could just fire in and killed huge numbers of people. You know, on top of this, people say, well, it's not about religion, and I agree it's not a religious conflict, but religion is there, and it's a key piece of it. It'd be hard to believe that this would happen to Nagorno-Karabakh if it was a Muslim population. It's a Christian population, and that's where, to me, I come in standing up for religious freedom and for religious minorities. I think it's important for us to stand up here. Another key thought on this, Mr. Chairman and Congressman Bilirakis, we have seen historic Christian populations being driven completely out of the Middle East, virtually. There's a population left in Egypt, but it's been driven out of virtually everywhere else. This is another historic Christian population that's going to get driven out if we don't take some policy moves. And thankfully, we have some that are available to us. But how many more of these do we have to see? And you can see that that's the play that's taking place in Nagorno-Karabakh, that Azerbaijan's going to squeeze the place, just force the people to leave. You can leave, but you can't return. They'll go to Europe. They'll go to another part of Armenia. They'll come to the United States or Canada. They'll make a nice living. There are a number of diaspora of Armenia around the world now that have done very well, some of them in this room. It's wonderful people. But do we want to see yet another ancient Christian population be driven out of its homeland? Yet another one. And a lot of this is with U.S. weaponry that the Azeris have, or Israeli weaponry that the Azeris have. And I just say, no, we should not have that taking place on our watch and at this time. And it doesn't need to happen. So I've got a few policy recommendations that I've put in here that I think would be important to do. One would be really for Congress to step up and take some of the lead on this. And I think you ought to put together a bipartisan Nagorno-Karabakh Human Rights Act. Just put together a Human Rights Act, not a resolution, an act, a bill, a law, that says here are the minimum standards for what we expect the security to be and the human rights to be able to be for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. And just state them out there clearly and specifically. 907 already exists that if U.S. weaponry is being used in an offensive fashion against Armenia, this is a violation of that, and that's taking place now. So I think unless Azerbaijan lifts that blockade, that those Section 907 sanctions should be put in place by the president, by the administration. They ought to take place now if they will not lift this blockade. Congress can come in with this Nagorno-Karabakh Human Rights Act to set in basic security guarantees. I think a congressional delegation traveling there would be to Nagorno-Karabakh. We tried to get into Nagorno-Karabakh. We couldn't get in. They wouldn't let us in to the place. But I would think they would let a congressional delegation. I'd hope they would. And if they wouldn't, that would also tell you something that's taking place. I think the American faith community that has really stood up. I chair an International Religious Freedom Summit, and we've got people of all faiths coming together to stand up for each other's religious freedom. And our mantra is pretty simple: religious freedom for everybody, everywhere, all the time. Well, that includes the people in Nagorno-Karabakh, that they should have that religious freedom. They should have that basic human rights standard and dignity to be able to practice their faith, even if it's different from the majority in that region. And that's why I'm here, and part of the reason that I'm standing up for them. And I would hope a broader faith community would stand up to support the people of Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh as a religious minority in this region. And maybe it's Christians and others for Armenia and for Nagorno-Karabakh that's stepping up in that region. Mr. Chairman, as I left that Yerevan, and you've been there, and you see Mount Ararat just staring over the city, which is such a majestic view from the city and from the airport, it reminds you of the historical significance of Armenia, first Christian nation on earth, before any other nation was, still is. It's been persecuted by multiple empires over thousands of years, the Persians, the Ottoman, Russians, others, and yet they're still there. They are still there. They're still fighting. And they just inspire you with their tenacity, with their courage, their pluck. Armenia, to me, and I put it in my testimony, is really kind of the Israel of Christendom, where it stood there so long, and we should stand with them, and we should not allow them to be driven out of this ancient homeland with the use particularly of U.S. weaponry doing this. And we should stand up policy-wise here, and we should stand up compassionately. We should have, I would hope, Christian activists and others from across this country and world standing up and sending aid and support to the Armenian people like they did during the genocide that took place in 1915. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for holding this hearing. I think it's a critical one, and hopefully this will spur some action taking place.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Ambassador. You know, your Human Rights Act idea is a great one. I had written a bill that never became law called the Azerbaijan Human Rights Act, and the backlash, uninformed, out of Baku was earth-shattering. As to what my motives were, there was even one Radio Free Europe reporter who, because she investigated, she was a stringer, she was a local person, but did tremendous reporting, she got a over 7-year prison sentence. So we had a hearing on her too, and we had people from Radio Free Europe, the head of it, come and testify. And we kept telling Aliyev, release these prisoners. And you're right about the issue of using American weaponry. Remember, Turkey used American weaponry in Cyprus. And so there's been a very poor track record. Of course, Turkey is not Azerbaijan, but there's a coalition, of course, there. So your idea of the Human Rights Act is a good one. We will follow up on it. I thank you for that.